Hi everyone, welcome to ELI, the place where you get your daily dose of inspiration for entrepreneurship. And today we have with us Mr. Sanjay Bhatia, who is the co-founder of Freightwalla, which is a platform on which businesses can take instant quotations on freight service, book it, and track the freight online. Hi Sanjay, welcome to ELI.
Hi, Priya. Thank you for having me.
I would request you to introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Sure. Yeah. So, Priya, I think about my growth, about my own personal journey, I think maybe the best place to start would be my very first job, right?
Sure.
So, I started my career in strategy consulting. I used to work in PwC, and specifically, I used to do M&A strategy consulting, right? So,
Okay.
some fairly, high powered work, which gave me access to, very sort of top level executives, straight out of my college. So, that was a very exciting job. And when I was working over there, I was focusing a lot on logistics. Okay.
Okay.
The reason I chose to actually focus on logistics, it's not something, I mean, I think in the last few years, it's become a fairly popular field.
Right.
But, 10 years, 10, 12 years ago, it really wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I chose to focus on logistics because my family business was also in the space, so it was a very natural sort of
Mm-hmm.
direction for me to go in. Right.
Okay.
Um, Spent some time, over there, learned a lot, different subsegments of logistics. And then after that, to be honest, didn't really like consulting too much. So
Mm-hmm.
I decided to transition to finance. And I started working in a VC firm. And that's when I
Okay.
started getting exposure to all of the technology businesses coming up around the world.
Mm.
And then, having spent some time over there, like seeing combining all the different parts of my work experience, the family business, the logistics strategy consulting, and the investing side. This sort of basic small idea of what eventually became Freightwalla, came into my head.
Mm-hmm.
And as I started doing more and more research about it, I was like, oh wow, like there's actually a lot of problems that can be solved using technology. And as I started going deeper and deeper into it, I started getting more and more convinced that there was a real opportunity. And then finally, when the some of these logistics technology companies in India, like people like Porter and all,
Mm.
started getting funded in intra-city logistics, right, within the city logistics. Then the moment I saw that happening, I was convinced. I was like, okay, fine, chalo, it's done. Like, the space is now picking up. People are putting some attention on it, and eventually, they are going to focus on international logistics, which is our core. And that's how I decided to start Freightwalla. It was a combination of all of the learnings across my whole life, and then a little bit of seeing what was happening in the market, and just recognizing that the timing now looked more appropriate than any time in the past. So that's sort of my background, and also how we got started with the company.
Did you do any market research when you got to know when you decided this is something I wanted to do? Any market research you did where you found this is a big market and this is the problem, and also tell us a bit about the problem that you are solving to set the context.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of market research, yes, I did a lot of market research. So secondary information is actually not so easily available if you're looking for market reports on our industry, which is called freight forwarding. By the way, that's
Mm,
the industry jargon. If you try and look it up online, for many, many, many years, there was nothing, right? You could not get access to reports online, but there, thankfully, my work experience in strategy consulting helped, because I had read some old reports, so I knew exactly where to look. And there was only one report really available, from a fairly obscure company. So I had that in my hand, right? And I knew the market sizes, I knew the growth rates, I knew the players, knew the challenges, everything. I mean, it's all listed out, right?
okay.
So that was my sort of base work. But the real crux of it, was not actually the secondary research, it was the primary research.
Mm,
So when we were thinking about starting the business, right? So size of market, does it really matter if it's more than $1 billion, right? I would argue no. Anything more than $1 billion market is a big market, right? Whether it's
right.
1 billion or 100 billion, you can make a very large company in that space, right? So
Absolutely.
now, just for clarity, our industry is very, very big, right? It's
mm,
it's almost 25 to 30 billion dollars in India only,
mm,
international logistics, right? So it's quite sizable. um but that was not my main concern, right? What we decided to do was, we actually just decided to pick up the phone and start calling all of the different importers and exporters, people who are moving cargo in and out of India. And we started
mm,
asking them, what problems do you face, right? Do you wish you had a better way of doing things, right? And in all of those conversations that we did, approximately 50, right, through various people we knew, people we were cold calling, people who walk into their office, etc., etc., we came up with a sort of fairly, you know narrow problem statement, right? And the problem statement, you asked me for it and I'll share it with you. um it is basically this: if you are an importer or exporter in India today, and you're dealing with your traditional crop of players, right?
mhm,
The international logistics companies, or freight forwarders as we call them, who've been around for the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years, right? It's a very, very old industry.
mm,
You're generally not very happy, right? You will often complain that there are problems in the delivery of cargo, process problems, delivery timelines don't get met, cargo, you will agree on a certain cost, let's say 100 rupees, but then finally when the delivery happens, you get an invoice of 120 rupees, 150 rupees. So cost escalations take place. And all of this basically means that you are a very frustrated human being, constantly having to take care of logistics rather than growing your business,
mm,
right? So there is an underlying reason for all of this, at least the way Freightwalla sees it, which is that if you look at the existing players of the industry, they are driven by manual processes, right? I mean, they have technology, yes, they do, but the technology is not very advanced,
mm,
right? And because of that, all their manual processes leads to so many different problems that when the client looks at it, he just sees inefficiency, lack of reliability, and lot of headache, right? Go out, speak to any importer or exporter and ask them, how do you feel about your international logistics? I doubt you'll find anyone who is like jumping up and down, being like, oh yeah, so amazing, so efficient, everything's taken care of. You will find one or two, I'm sure. India's a big country, but not very many of them.
okay. Now that you have understood the problem, and it's a common problem for all the importers and exporters, how did you go about to solve them? What was your approach? And you can also relate that to the different modules inside your platform.
Yeah, sure. So basically, let's first set out a little bit of groundwork on what it takes to move cargo internationally,
Sure.
right? Let's just use a simple example of an exporter. You have a factory in Gujarat and you have a overseas buyer. Let's say he's somewhere in the UK, and let's just call it Manchester or something like that. Okay.
Mm,
Now there's 5 steps you need to complete in order to make sure your cargo gets from your factory to the buyer's warehouse in Manchester. First thing you need is to have a truck come pick up your cargo from the factory, take it to the port, right?
mm,
At the port, let's say Bombay port, you get customs clearance done. That's step number 2. Then you load the cargo on a ship. Step number 3, the ship goes all the way from Bombay to, let's say, London, where again the cargo is offloaded and you do customs clearance. Step number 4, and put it on a truck for final delivery till Manchester, right? So 5 steps.
mm,
Okay. Now, in these 5 steps, you will typically find Indian exporters having to take care of 3 steps, right? Most foreign buyers will tell you that, hey, I like your product, everything is great, but I need you to deliver it until my country, and from here I'll take care of things, right? So most Indian exporters have to take care of the trucking part from their factory to the port, customs clearance, and ocean freight. Yeah.
mm,
And in this scenario, right, because there are 3 different players involved, right, but the work is all interrelated, right?
right.
You can't proceed with customs clearance until the truck reaches the port. You
Correct.
can't proceed with the shipping until the customs clearance is done. You
Mm,
can't do anything if the trucking itself is not moving on time, right?
right.
And they all interrelate with each other as well. Like, I won't go into too much detail, but there's a lot of technicalities where the steps interrelate with each other. Now imagine you have an offline player who is managing all of this work on phone calls, emails, and if you're really lucky, Excel spreadsheets. Yeah.
Mm,
You can imagine how many things can go wrong, and they do. And that is the entire point of it. Those things do go wrong. Yeah.
mm,
So in this, in these three steps, there are two, additionally, I'll just share a little bit. There's two things you got to take care of, right? One is the physical movement of cargo, the work stream of the physical movement,
Mm-hmm.
right? Having the cargo actually be come from the factory to the port and get loaded on the ship, etc.
Mm.
And the second is the documentation work stream, right? So
Right.
that gets prepared whilst the cargo is moving. Yeah.
Mm.
More complications, as you can imagine. Not
Right.
only are you managing three different players, you're managing two different work streams at the same time. Yeah.
Right.
And because of the way the industry operates, this is where all the problems start. So what have we done, right? We
Mm.
basically recognize that, look, these manual work streams are going to be very challenging for any player to manage at any degree of speed, high frequency, or high scale. Yeah. And the way to solve this is to actually digitize and automate the entire process, right?
Okay.
So that's what we do. And our steps, our platform is basically built across, I would say, roughly three different main pillars. Okay.
Mm.
One is starting from even before the exporter has chosen to move his cargo, the he has to choose the routes and the costing and do all the planning of how long the cargo will take to be delivered to his buyer, share that information across, so everything related to costing and planning even before the cargo starts moving, right? So that
Mm.
is the first pillar of our online platform. We have built a system where clients can come in, with a few details punched in, they can quickly get estimates of their different route options and the costs involved against it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then step number two, which is where we focused maximum effort, is in actually digitizing and automating those two work streams that I mentioned, right? The physical movement of the cargo as well as the documentation work stream.
Mm.
And the way we built our system is that it is all interlinked, right? So every time, some exception takes place, a flag is raised, and therefore, we have full knowledge of what's going on. So we're able to capture that and quickly do problem solving for the client so that there is no problem in the movement of cargo, right? So that there is
Mm-hmm.
no cargo delay or cost escalation. And that's really the magic of the system.
Mm.
It's very, very technical, so I won't be able to explain it in a lot of detail, but that is where all of the, USP and the power of the system comes in. And then the third pillar to the platform is where we do automated cargo tracking, right? And that is where you are able to, this is the part that the client sees and gets the most sort of comfort with, right? They
Mm.
see that, okay, I'm getting regular updates for my cargo, I know where it is at any given point in time, I can keep my buyer up to date, I can keep my stakeholders up to date, I can, if you're a logistics manager in a large company, you can even manage your internal stakeholders, because the logistics manager has to report to the marketing manager about, where's the cargo, why hasn't it reached the foreign buyer yet, etc., etc.
Mm.
So that sort of visibility is the third main pillar, right? And we've also, taken a lot of pains to try and integrate the workflow management with the tracking, because once you're automatically tracking what's happening on the ground, you can actually use your workflow manager to start taking, very interesting actions, like for example, you want to reroute cargo, make some corrections,
Mm.
you want to expedite, delay, etc., etc. It can all be managed through connecting the tracking with the workflow management. And then that is the core of our business. That is where we have created a lot of value for our clients. That is where they are happy with us, and that is how we continue to attract clients and scale with them.
Okay. Uh, the way I see it, I think to reach a viability point, minimum viable product, you'd have to, integrate with lot many players, both from an ocean logistic point of view and a intra-land logistic point of view, uh, and a lot of analytics platforms interlinked to see the tracking and everything. Um, so can you tell us how did you go about building the platform initially, and when did you see the product was market fit? So how, I mean, how did you pay for building the platform? How do you, who built the platform, and anything you'd like to tell us about that phase?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll break this answer into two parts, right? First, I'll just tell you that everything that we built is proprietary and was built in house.
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's not like we've taken some off the shelf product and we started reworking it or something. um, there are a lot of problems with that approach, especially for our industry, though I do acknowledge that for other industries, that approach can work really well. But in our case, we did not think it would work really well because of something I mentioned just a little bit earlier, right? There are existing softwares that are out there for our industry, but they are all very, they're data entry softwares. They don't actually guide the process or do any of the work. You still need manual people punching in all of that data. Now you can punch it in on a software, you can punch it in on an Excel sheet.
Mm-hmm.
It's that there's really very little difference between the two. You just pay a lot more for the software, and it'll organize and show you the information in a different way. But honestly, the value proposition is as good as an Excel sheet, in my opinion, right?
Right.
So we built everything in house. Now coming to your the point you raised about how do you establish product market fit when there's so many integrations to do, and
Mm-hmm.
you're a startup, you have less resources, probably can't
Right.
do everything at the same time.
Yeah.
And honestly, we chose to focus. Okay, first let me say that yes, there's so many integrations to be done that when we starting for a very long time, we did not have everything in place. Absolutely not. But we were still adding clients and scaling, right? And happy clients, good clients, repeat clients, paying money. We are earning unit profitable from day zero, right? So how did we go about getting achieving that goal? Was we saw this entire sort of landscape and we decided to just narrow down on where the pain is most acute,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we started from there. So we started with the ocean leg part of it, right? So number one, international logistics is all about the ocean freight,
Mm-hmm.
right? Obviously, I mean that's how you're getting from one country to the other.
Right.
um and that is also where small mistakes can lead to huge problems, right? So I'll give you one example of what a small mistake means. There's a document called the bill of lading, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
the most important document when you're shipping cargo internationally, except for maybe one other customs document called the shipping bill, right? So these two are the most important documents. If you have a small typo, right? So let's say Priya Ranjan Mohanty is actually accidentally misspelled as Priyal Ranjan Mohanty. Removing that L, right? If you don't do it on time, will cost you $200, right? And the cost of logistics, like a typical cost of logistics, is something like $2,000. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got 10% of the cost, which can come from a silly typo like that, right? And then relate, I mean, like that, there are many other things that can happen. Small mistakes in documentation or process can lead to huge issues. Yeah. So we decided to focus only on this piece to begin with, right? We just focused on getting the process built into our system, right? Identifying the key steps involved, then start automating them, bring in different technologies to make the process more efficient, to make the software do more and more of the work so that the team does less and less of this, what honestly internally I call it, it's a little bit like gada majdoori. I mean, it has to be done, but it doesn't mean that you should do it yourself, right?
Right.
The software can do it, and then our team, what the way we see our team evolving is that they become problem solvers for our clients, right? So they are not just sitting there and punching data into the system. The vision is that the technology takes care of all of the day-to-day work, and then the team is involved in helping the clients build successful businesses where they all of their overseas clients are happy and they get more and more business against it, right?
Okay.
So short answer to your question is we didn't integrate everything at the same time, but we chose to just narrow down when given the fact that there's so much to do, right? We chose to just narrow down on where we thought that the pain point was most acute and focus in on that. And once that was validated, everything else is like a little bit more based on logic. I think that's one thing that I took away from me from consulting, which is that I'm not, I didn't feel like we just always needed market data. Like, of course, market data is extremely important for validation, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot you can accomplish with just business fundamentals and logic. If your business fundamentals are sound and you apply the correct logic, you have at least some basic understanding of the industry, there's a lot that you will be able to figure out by just, sitting in your room and thinking things through. And then you obviously go out there to validate it. But the validation, if you've got your thought process right, I have found that in 90% of the cases the thought process gets validated, and maybe in 10% it doesn't. So then you actually save time, because you validation takes a lot of time, right? It takes a lot of phone calls. Sometimes people don't answer your phone calls.
Mm.
Sometimes they'll set you up, say, yeah, yeah, come, I'll give you some feedback. He's not available. These things happen, right? And then how many will you do? You have to do 50 or 100 to feel comfortable with your conclusions.
Right.
That's going to take a lot of time, right? But if you've got the right thought process, you've got the right logic, you've got the right premises, like your base understanding, I think there's a lot you can accomplish with just good first principles thinking. And that's what we basically did, and at least for us it worked out, so I'm very grateful. Then again, ours is not like a sunrise industry where everything is new. So there was a lot that we could figure out with logic. There are other industries where perhaps validation is everything, and I acknowledge that as well.
Next question that comes to my mind is on the business front. Like you said, you were profitable from day one. Uh, can you tell us what are the different streams of making revenue at your venture? How do you make money?
Yeah, sure. So we basically just have a handling fee for every sort of shipment that we take care of on behalf of our clients, right? And then in the future, we are looking at additional cross sales opportunities that will come from, for example, selling cargo insurance, right?
Hmm.
Introducing our clients to warehousing partners, etc. Right? So all of these additional value added services that come like the core logistics is how we make money.
Okay. And what is the magnitude in terms of percentage of shipment value, or um, how do we get a number to that?
Yeah, so it depends, right? It's not standardized like one shipment is equal to another. So there's like a different fee involved for, let's say, shipments that go to Middle East. There's a different fee involved for shipments that go to the USA. There's different fees involved based, and different mud I guess money to be made. That's not a very accurate term, but um based on the number of services that we're offering, right? So there will be some clients who will take only ocean freight, it'll come with like a X amount. And then some people who want customs clearance, trucking and ocean freight will come with a Y amount, etc. So that is actually like there's a long list of sort of charges, and I don't want to rattle off all the numbers, but that is a way to think about the business.
Gotcha. Uh, would love to know a little bit on the personal front of being an entrepreneur. So, can you tell us why you chose to become an entrepreneur? What drives you to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I can't tell you exactly why. It's something that I never thought there was any other option in my life. I mean, not that I haven't had other jobs, but that I always knew that someday I was going to be an entrepreneur, right?
Mhm.
When I was growing up, I didn't know when I was going to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know how. I didn't know in what industry. But something inside of me always said that, yeah, like one day you are going to strike out and do it by yourself.
Okay.
um, it might help that I come primarily from a business family where where everyone in my close family as well as my extended family, everyone is an entrepreneur. Like, for whatever reason, I don't exactly know why, but that probably had some part to play in all of it. Um, Personally, like what I like about entrepreneurship is the freedom to, like, if you like business, this is the ultimate way to express like creativity in business, right? I mean, when you are the person in charge, then you're not constrained by anyone, and if you have like an interesting idea, you can run with it.
Right.
And I think that is like, to me, the best upside of being an entrepreneur, right? If you like business and you have creative ideas, this is how you express them. Because if you're in any other role, of course you can express your creative ideas and all, but then you are also trying to convince other people, oh, we should do it, we should invest in it, get the whole team, the whole company aligned on it, and
Mm,
it's more constraining.
that is so true. Uh, what did you say is the meaning of entrepreneurship for you? How do you define the term entrepreneur?
Interesting question.
Who is an entrepreneur?
Okay, I think an entrepreneur is someone who sees the world and thinks that some things could be done better, and is convinced that he is the person who's going to do it. He is the person who's going to make it better. It could be an industry, it could be the whole world, like impact companies, people who have a social angle, etc.
Hmm.
um yeah, and it's also definitely someone who has like that self belief that yeah, I'm going to be the one who's going to you know take this system, and I'm going to improve it based on like this company that I'll create.
Hmm.
And that is how I would define entrepreneurship.
The final question. Tell us about the lessons that you have learned as an entrepreneur, which we can take away and apply to our ventures as well.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay, two, I think two main lessons, right? um One is be patient, persevere. And
Hmm.
I think this is something that all entrepreneurs will tell you coming out of COVID, because things got tough for a lot of people, but they're also getting better, right?
Hmm.
So be patient, persevere, and there will be ups and downs, but eventually you'll come out of it and everything will be fine. Number one lesson of a post COVID life. And the second thing I would say is one thing that I've found very helpful is to not confuse the noise for the signal, which I find is very easy to do,
Hmm.
in certain businesses, because there's so much data, there's so many different ways you can look at the data. And if
Right.
you're not analyzing it in the right way and preparing the right segmentation, you could easily think that your product is not working when your only problem is that you're selling it to the wrong person,
Right.
right? Like, let's say you have a Ferrari, right?
Hmm.
Let's hypothetically, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is going to be a very crude example, but
Yeah.
hypothetically, you have a Ferrari, but then you try and sell it, in a chore bazaar,
Ah.
like, you got to know who you're selling it to, and what you're selling. So, and then that matching is very easy if you're not segmenting the data, to think that your product is either flying off the shelf and it's amazing, but you're maybe giving it away too cheap, right? Or you don't have a working product because you're selling it to the wrong person, but actually if you just change the person you're selling it to, it would do much better. So there's a lot
Hmm.
of ways to get lost in the data.
Hmm.
So I think it's very important to be able to look into these things in a lot of detail, and just make sure that you're segmenting your analysis in the right way. I personally found this extremely helpful, and has helped us a lot in the company.
Yeah. Uh, Thanks for your time, Sanjay. I think it is the time that we end this discussion. It was a pleasure to host you on our platform, and our best wishes for Freightwalla.
Thank you, Priya. It was lovely to be here. And once again, thank you for having me.